Cruise ships are supposed to be about luxury, laughter, and open seas. But not every voyage makes it back to shore the same way it left. Tonight, you'll hear 4 chilling encounters that passengers swore were real, stories rechecked and verified from deep corners of Reddit and survivor accounts. These aren't urban legends, these are testimonies people tried to forget, but couldn't. From phantom crew members to vanished passengers, from elevators stopping on decks that don't exist, to sealed cargo that should never have been opened. Each one carries the kind of fear that makes you think twice before your next vacation. And before we begin, dim the lights, hit subscribe, smash that bell icon, and let us know in the comments. Would you step aboard again after hearing this? Story 1. You shouldn't drink that. That was the first thing I ever heard him say. Low, careful, like a warning whispered through clenched teeth. My name's Eric, I'm 31, and I work in IT back in Phoenix. The cruise wasn't my idea, it was my sister's. She thought getting me out on the ocean after a brutal breakup would reset my brain, give me some peace. Truth is, I've never been much of a traveler. I'm the kind of guy who double-checks door locks at night, avoids elevators if I can help it, and keeps earplugs in on flights just to block out the world. But she insisted, and when someone you trust insists that hard, you eventually give in. The first night at sea was supposed to feel magical, and it did. For a moment, lights glittered across the deck. The air smelled of salt and sunscreen, and the ship's speakers hummed with soft jazz that seemed to follow you everywhere. Every corridor gleamed too perfectly, every surface polished, every laugh echoing like it was bouncing inside a giant glass bottle. That's when I saw him. He wasn't like the other crew. No name tag, no smile. He moved with the precision of someone repeating an action for the 1,000th time. Tray balanced. One glass offered. Always just one. His eyes didn't search the room, they locked straight onto me, like he'd already decided who was next. I froze, glass halfway to my lips. The waiter leaned close enough that I felt the brush of his sleeve against mine. "Don't," he whispered. I glanced around, expecting someone else to notice, but the other passengers were caught up in their own conversations, raising their glasses, laughing like nothing was wrong. My sister waved at me from across the bar, mouthing something I couldn't hear. When I looked back, the waiter had slipped between 2 couples, vanishing as if he'd never been there at all. That's how it started. At first, I convinced myself it was nerves. New setting, new people, my head still clouded from the breakup. Maybe I imagined him. That's what I told myself when I tried to sleep later, staring at the ceiling fan of our cabin spinning in slow circles. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell anyone. But the second night, it happened again. This time I was in the ship's lounge, tucked into a corner chair with a beer. I felt the cushion sink beside me before I even turned. Same waiter, same tray, same single glass, glinting in the neon bar lights like liquid silver. He leaned close and murmured, "Not for you." I pushed my beer away, hands trembling. "Who are you?" I asked. His eyes darted around, scanning the crowd like he was making sure no one else could hear. Then, barely moving his lips, he whispered, "You don't want to know." The next morning, a woman at our assigned breakfast table didn't show up. She'd been there the first 2 mornings, laughing, talking about her grandkids, trading cruise tips. The head waiter brushed it off, said some passengers like to sleep in. But I knew. My stomach turned cold when I remembered her laughing at the bar last night, holding a tall glass I hadn't recognized. I didn't say anything. I just listened as the others joked about late nights and hangovers, while her untouched plate was quietly cleared away. Later that night, I tried to forget about it. I wandered the ship's hallways, letting the low hum of the engines and the faint slosh of the sea press into me. The corridors had a way of repeating. Same patterned carpet, same framed photos of lighthouses and rocky coasts, same exit signs glowing like tired eyes. But as I turned one corner, I stopped dead. The waiter was there, alone. No crowd, no clinking glasses, just him, standing at the far end of the hall with that single drink balanced perfectly on the tray. His head tilted slightly, like he'd been waiting for me. I blinked, and he was gone. My skin prickled. I hurried back to my cabin, heart thudding against my ribs. My sister was asleep, snoring softly, oblivious. I lay in the dark, ears straining. Somewhere beyond our door, footsteps passed. Slow. Even. Too measured to be a wandering drunk passenger. They stopped outside our room, and then came the faintest sound. A single clink, like a glass being set gently on the floor. That was the last normal night of the cruise. The next morning, I opened our cabin door carefully, half expecting to see a glass waiting in the hall. There was nothing. Just a perfectly clean stretch of carpet, patterned in navy swirls, too bright under the fluorescent lights. My sister yawned behind me, stretching her arms. "Breakfast?" she asked. I nodded, but I didn't tell her why I checked the floor twice before walking out. The dining hall buzzed like nothing was wrong. Families laughed. Forks scraped plates. A crew member carried a tray stacked with coffee cups. The woman who'd been missing yesterday never returned. No one mentioned her. When I asked the head waiter if he'd seen her, his polite smile didn't even flicker. "Which woman, sir?" I froze. "The one who sat right there. Blonde hair, glasses. She was here with us the first 2 mornings." His smile held steady. "Our tables rotate guests, sir. I think you must be mistaken." But I wasn't. I could still hear her laugh echoing in my head. I glanced at my sister, waiting for her to jump in, but she was sipping her orange juice, oblivious. When I tried to bring it up later, she shook her head. "Eric, you need to relax. Not everything's a mystery. People change their routines. It's vacation." That night, I decided to keep my eyes open. I stayed in the bar longer than usual, ordering soda instead of anything stronger, letting the sounds of conversation wash over me. I scanned the crowd for the waiter, my pulse jumping every time someone in uniform moved past. For an hour, nothing happened. Then, around midnight, I saw him again. He slid through the door without a sound, weaving past laughing couples and tired families like smoke. His tray held only one glass again, pale liquid swirling faintly in the low light. He stopped by a young couple seated near the back. The man, maybe mid-20s, laughed as he accepted the drink without hesitation. His girlfriend clinked her own glass against his, and they both drank. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. It felt like I was underwater, watching something I wasn't supposed to see. The waiter's eyes flicked up, locking with mine. That same cold stare, cutting through the noise and chatter around us. He shook his head slowly, like a warning, before gliding away. When I turned back to the couple, the man was slumped forward, head on the table. His girlfriend laughed, nudging him, assuming he'd had too much. A crew member rushed over to help. Within minutes, 2 staff escorted him out, carrying him between them like dead weight. I never saw him again. The girlfriend sat alone at breakfast the next morning, silent and pale, staring at her plate like she was waiting for him to appear. The following day, her chair was empty too. By now, I couldn't shake the dread. I told myself to report it properly, to find security, demand answers. But whenever I got close, my resolve crumbled. Crew members smiled too easily. Their answers were too rehearsed. And every time I thought about pressing harder, I felt that waiter's eyes on me, as if he was always nearby, watching. On the 3rd night, my sister insisted we check out the ship's nightclub. I didn't want to go. The thought of flashing lights, tight crowds, and that ever-present possibility of seeing him again made my stomach twist. But she was excited, so I went. The music thudded through the floor. Lights strobed across the dance floor, and bodies moved in chaotic rhythm. I tried to focus on her smile, tried to pretend this was just a trip, just a distraction. But then I saw him, standing in the corner, untouched by the strobe lights, tray perfectly still while everything around him pulsed and shook. He raised the glass toward me this time, and for the first time I realized he wasn't offering it, he was warning me with it. I turned away, grabbing my sister's hand. "We need to go," she frowned, confused. "What? We just got here." But something in my face must have unsettled her, because she followed me without arguing. Back in our cabin, I locked the door, double-latched it, and pushed a chair against the handle. My sister groaned. "You're being paranoid, Eric. seriously. "What is going on with you?" I didn't answer right away. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. The hallway outside was quiet. Too quiet. And then, 3 slow knocks. When I checked through the peephole, no one was there. But a single glass sat on the floor. I didn't touch the glass. I didn't even breathe near it. My sister groaned when she saw me staring at it through the peephole. "Eric, it's just some drunk prank. Someone's messing with you." "Then why does no one else see him?" I whispered. She sighed and crawled back into bed, muttering about how I needed to unplug my brain. But I couldn't sleep. I sat in the chair against the door, heart pounding at every sound in the hallway. When I finally drifted off, it was to the low hum of the ship's engines and the faintest clink of glass I swore I still heard echoing outside. The next morning, the glass was gone. Just clean carpet again, like nothing had ever been there. That's when I decided to go to security. The office was tucked away down a side corridor I'd never noticed before. Near the theater, 2 men in Navy uniforms sat behind the desk, clipboards stacked high. I told them everything. The waiter, the missing passengers, the drinks, the glass left outside my door. My words tumbled over each other, desperate, shaky. When I finished, one of the officers wrote something down slowly, then glanced at his partner. They exchanged a look I couldn't read. "Sir," the first one said calmly, "we appreciate you coming in, but we don't have any crew member matching that description." "Of course you don't," I snapped. "That's the point. He's not supposed to be here." The second officer leaned forward, hands folded. "Maybe what you saw was a guest in costume? Sometimes passengers like to role-play, create characters." "Role-play?" My voice cracked. "People are disappearing." The first officer's smile didn't move an inch. "Sir, no one has been reported missing." My mouth went dry. They handed me a small card with a number to call if I noticed anything else unusual. I left the office more rattled than before. When I told my sister, she rolled her eyes. "Maybe stop talking to random strangers about this, okay? You're starting to sound unhinged." That night, I almost believed her. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe grief from the breakup, stress, too much time staring at screens had finally cracked something in me. I tried to relax, tried to sit on the deck with a soda and just enjoy the stars. And then I heard it, behind me, low and close. "You're not listening." I spun around. The waiter stood a few feet away, tray steady, glass shimmering faintly in the dim deck light. He didn't smile, didn't blink. "Why me?" I whispered. He tilted his head, studying me like he was measuring something. "Because you see me." I backed away, knocking my chair over. A couple nearby glanced at me, confused, but their eyes slid right past him like he wasn't there at all. When I looked back, he was gone again. Sleep was impossible. I tossed in bed, listening to every groan of the ship, every shudder of the waves. Around 3 a.m., I thought I heard whispering outside the cabin door. I pressed my ear to it. A man's voice. Too soft to make out words, but steady, deliberate. Then, a clink. And another glass. I yanked the door open before I could stop myself. The hallway was empty, but the glass was there, perfectly balanced in the center of the carpet, condensation sliding down its side. I was shaking so hard I almost dropped it when I bent to pick it up. The liquid inside was clear, odorless. Just water, maybe. I brought it inside, set it on the desk, stared at it until dawn. By breakfast, the glass was gone again. My sister swore she hadn't touched it, and I realized, whether I drank it or not, he wasn't going to stop leaving them. By the 4th day of the cruise, I wasn't just paranoid. I was unraveling. I'd stopped sleeping more than an hour at a time, jumping at every shadow, every sound. My sister begged me to see the onboard doctor. I almost did, until I saw him. Not the doctor, the waiter. He was standing outside the medical center door when I approached, tray in hand, glass shining faintly. He didn't move, didn't speak. I froze, and in that split second, 2 other passengers walked right past him like he wasn't even there. They stepped straight through his arm without flinching. My stomach flipped. I backed away slowly and didn't look back. That night I tried something different. I hid my phone near the cabin door, recording video. My plan was simple: catch proof of him leaving the glass. When I checked it in the morning, the screen was static for 3 minutes straight. Then it cut back to normal hallway footage. The glass was already there. I almost threw the phone overboard. By dinner, my nerves were so frayed I could hardly hold a fork. That's when I overheard it. 2 older women at the table beside us, whispering about their neighbor's daughter. "She was there yesterday at the pool, wasn't she?" one asked. "Now the cabin's empty. They said she must have disembarked at the last port." My heart raced. I leaned closer, desperate. "They didn't disembark," I said. Both women looked at me like I was insane. I lowered my voice. Did she take a drink from a waiter?" Their expressions changed instantly. Their eyes darted away, and one of them pushed back her chair so fast it scraped the floor. They left without a word. That's when I knew. I wasn't the first person to see him. I wasn't the only one he'd chosen. Later that night, I stood on the balcony staring at the black water. I wanted to believe if I jumped, if I ended it on my terms, I'd break whatever cycle he was pulling me into. But the thought of the ocean swallowing me whole froze me to the railing. I turned back toward the cabin, and he was inside. The waiter stood at the foot of my bed, tray perfectly balanced, glass trembling ever so slightly, as if the liquid itself knew it didn't belong here. My sister was asleep, oblivious. He looked at me. His face was pale, pores too smooth, eyes too flat, like a mask stretched too tight over something else. "You're making this harder," he said softly. His voice didn't echo, didn't breathe. It just was. "What happens if I drink it?" I asked, my throat closing on the words. "You stop seeing," he said. "You stop fearing." I shook my head, backing against the sliding door to the balcony. "And if I don't?" His smile returned then, slow and wrong, reaching his ears but never his eyes. "Then you keep watching. Forever." He set the glass on the nightstand and turned toward the door. My heart pounded as the latch clicked open by itself. He stepped out, and the door shut without a sound. I didn't touch the glass, but in the morning, it was empty. I started counting the days left until the cruise was supposed to end. 2. Just 2 more, and I'd be back on land, back among people who could see what I was seeing. Or maybe people who'd never believe me at all. But I clung to that thought like a lifeline. If I could just survive until we docked, I'd be free. That morning, I went to the atrium for coffee. I deliberately sat where everyone could see me, surrounded by noise, laughter, the clinking of mugs. I told myself, he won't come here, not in the open. But when I glanced toward the glass elevators, I froze. He was there. Inside one of them, gliding silently upward with his tray in hand. No one else noticed. A couple giggled as the elevator passed, oblivious to the pale figure pressed against the glass, staring straight at me. I left my coffee untouched. The rest of that day blurred into a haze of paranoia. I shadowed my sister everywhere. Pool deck, gift shop, buffet. Afraid she'd vanish if I let her out of sight. She laughed at first, then grew irritated. By evening, she snapped. "You're ruining this trip. If you can't calm down, maybe you need real help." I didn't answer. My eyes had drifted over her shoulder. The waiter stood across the atrium, perfectly still. No tray this time, just his hands clasped in front of him like a mourner, watching. That night, I tried to stay awake. Every time my eyes sagged, I reminded myself, 2 more days. Hold on. But sometime around 3 a.m., I must have slipped under. I woke to the sound of clinking ice. The glass was on my nightstand again, beads of condensation rolling down its side. I sat up slowly, afraid to look, afraid not to. He wasn't in the room. Instead, I noticed something chilling. My sister's bed was empty, sheets perfectly smoothed, like no one had ever lain there. I stumbled into the hallway, searching frantically. A couple passed by, smiling politely. "Excuse me," I gasped. "My sister. Did you see her leave?" Their smiles faltered. "You came on this cruise alone," the woman said, her tone carefully measured. "Are you feeling okay?" "No," I whispered. "No, she was." The man touched my arm, too gently. "Sometimes the sea plays tricks on the mind. Just rest." I pulled away, heart hammering. I knew she'd been real. I knew she was gone. The last day arrived like a sick joke. I stood on deck as the shoreline finally appeared, gray against the horizon. Relief should have flooded me, but all I felt was dread. I kept thinking about what he'd said. "If you don't drink, you keep watching. Forever." And then, in the reflection of the glass railing, I saw him standing behind me, not on deck, not in the open air, only in the reflection. Tray balanced, glass waiting. I spun around, nothing. But when I looked back at the glass again, he was closer. I don't remember disembarking. I don't remember customs, the airport, the flight home. All I know is this: I'm back on land now, in my own apartment, thousands of miles from that ship. And yet, every night, I wake to the sound of ice clinking. Every morning, there's a fresh glass of water on my nightstand, beads of condensation sliding down its side. Sometimes I think about drinking it, just to see if he was telling the truth. But most nights, I just lie there, in the dark, waiting, watching. Because now, I understand. You don't leave him behind, he leaves with you. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't during a storm or in the middle of the night. It was in broad daylight, with steel drums playing and families laughing under the sun. I remember standing at the railing with a drink in hand, when a sudden voice cut through the music. It wasn't the cheerful announcements about buffets or excursions. This one was sharp, metallic, echoing from every speaker on the ship. "All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately." Nobody around me reacted. Not a single person looked up. I thought maybe I'd misheard it. Except when I turned toward the crew, I saw a line of them already forming along the deck. Their faces were blank, their eyes forward. Each one carried a bright orange life jacket. And they weren't looking at the families. They were looking directly at me. My name's Sean Matthews. I'm 34 years old, and I work in IT back in Portland. I booked this cruise on a whim after my breakup. One of those treat-yourself decisions you regret halfway through packing. I'm not adventurous, I'm not social, and I've never been good with crowds. But I figured a week at sea would be harmless, maybe even healing. I didn't expect to feel like the only one hearing orders no one else could hear. When the announcement repeated, "All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately," my stomach dropped. Because I'd already done the muster drill on the first day, with everyone else. And yet the crew at the railing kept staring at me, holding out a single orange jacket. I didn't move. Not until a hand brushed my shoulder. I turned, and the man standing there wasn't part of the vacation crowd. His uniform was faded, almost outdated, the kind of design I'd only seen in old photos of ships from the 70s. His skin was pale, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. And when he leaned closer, his voice was so low I almost didn't catch it. "You need to come with us now, before they notice." I froze when he said it. Before, who noticed? The families around us kept eating ice cream and snapping photos, totally oblivious. A band started up on the pool deck, drums pounding, a woman laughing loud enough to echo off the railings. Yet none of it seemed to touch the man in front of me. His eyes darted past me toward the crew, still holding life jackets. They hadn't moved an inch. Just stood there, perfectly still, orange nylon dangling like bait. He squeezed my arm. "Don't put it on. Whatever you do, don't put it on." I swallowed hard. My throat was bone dry. "Why?" I whispered. But he didn't answer. He just stepped away, weaving through the crowd without a single head turning toward him, and vanished between two deck chairs like he'd slipped behind a curtain no one else could see. When I looked back, the crew were gone too. Life jackets, blank stares, all of it. Only thing left was the faint hiss of static, still buzzing in the speakers overhead, long after the announcement had supposedly ended. That was the last normal drink I'd have on that cruise. The rest of the afternoon passed in a fog. I tried telling myself I was overtired, maybe sun-drunk, maybe hallucinating from dehydration, but every time I passed a speaker mounted on the walls, I swore I heard the faintest crackle, like someone was waiting for me to get close enough. By dinner, I couldn't shake it. The dining hall buzzed with voices, silverware clinking, waiters weaving between tables. I tried to lose myself in the noise, in the safe rhythm of eating, but halfway through my entree, a low tone rolled through the hall, like a submarine horn cutting across the chatter. And then, that voice again. All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately. Forks kept scraping. People kept chewing, no one moved. Except the waiter standing at my elbow. He wasn't the same pale man from before, but his uniform was wrong too. Shoulder patches I hadn't seen on anyone else this trip. He set down a glass of water, leaned low, and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You missed the drill. That's dangerous." I nearly jumped out of my chair. What drill? We already had it. But when I looked up to argue, he was gone. Glass of water still sweating on the table, but no waiter in sight. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. A woman across from me smiled, mid-conversation with her husband, and then I realized her fork hovered an inch above her plate, frozen in place. His hand was still raised in a half gesture, not moving, not blinking. I blinked, and suddenly they were chewing again, like nothing had happened. I stumbled out of the hall before dessert even came. The corridors felt too long that night, like the ship had stretched. Carpet muffled my footsteps, the low thrum of the engines filling every corner. I passed one of those little evacuation maps on the wall, the green lines leading to Muster Station B, except this one was marked Deck 13. I stopped cold. There was no Deck 13 on this ship. I'd memorized the elevator list the first day, went from 12 straight to 14. I touched the glass frame and realized it was warm, almost hot. Then, faintly, from somewhere above me, "All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately." I ran. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that metallic voice buzzing in my skull, cutting through dreams like static. When I finally did drift off, it was only to jolt awake to a pounding knock on my cabin door. 3 sharp raps. I sat up fast, heart in my throat. For a second, I thought maybe it was housekeeping, but the digital clock by the bed glowed 3:13 a.m. The knocking came again. "All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately." This time, the voice wasn't from the PA system. It was right outside my door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, slowly, I slid out of bed and pressed my eye to the peephole. A life jacket filled my view. Someone stood inches from my door, holding it up as if offering it. Their face was hidden, their other hand motionless at their side. I blinked, and the peephole was empty. But when I opened the door, the life jacket was lying there on the carpet. Damn PAs, I shoved it under the bed and spent the rest of the night with the lights on. By morning, I convinced myself I dreamed it. That's what the sea does, right? Messes with your sense of balance, with your sleep. Except when I left my cabin, there were wet footprints leading down the hall. Bare feet, too small for an adult. They trailed toward the stairwell. Something in me said don't follow. But of course, I did. The stairwell was empty. Too empty. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, like the walls were further apart than they should have been. And then I saw it. A glowing number stenciled above the landing, 13. My legs went weak. That number wasn't supposed to exist on this ship. But the footprints led straight to the heavy steel door marked Muster Station C. I should have turned around. Instead, I pushed it open. The air inside hit me like ice water. The room stretched impossibly wide, lined with rows and rows of orange life jackets dangling from hooks. Hundreds of them, swaying gently even though there was no wind. The fluorescent lights above flickered. and in the far corner, shadows shifted. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. "All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately." The voice roared through hidden speakers, so loud it rattled my teeth. And then, the crew appeared. Not one, not two, dozens. Their uniforms from different decades, some crisp and modern, others sun-faded and out of style, all of them holding life jackets out toward me, like priests offering communion. I backed up until my shoulders hit cold steel. "What do you want from me?" A man stepped forward, the same pale one from the pool deck. His lips curled into something almost like a smile. "To keep the count." Before I could ask what that meant, the rows of life jackets began to rise, not swinging, but lifting, as if invisible bodies were sliding into them, buckles fastening, straps tightening, air filling them until they hung rigid in the air like ghosts ready to march. The pale man leaned closer, his breath like salt water and rust. "You missed the drill, Sean. Now you take their place." I froze against the steel door, my pulse hammering. The life jackets dangled midair, straps twitching like puppet strings pulled by unseen hands. My throat felt tight, like the air itself had thickened. I don't understand," I stammered. The pale man's head tilted, his eyes were bottomless. "Every passenger mustered. Every drill accounted for. That's the rule. The living forget. But we don't." His words echoed strangely, as though the room itself was repeating them. I shook my head. "But there isn't a Deck 13. None of this is real." Behind him, the frozen rows of jackets shifted again. Slowly, they began to drift toward me. A wall of orange nylon and invisible weight. I stumbled backward, slamming my fists against the door behind me. It wouldn't budge. "You saw the call," the pale man continued, stepping closer. "You heard the warning. Once you hear it, you belong here." Something brushed my arm, cold, damp. I looked down. One of the life jackets had floated close enough to press against my wrist. The straps slithered over my skin like fingers. I tore it off and bolted deeper into the room. Rows and rows of jackets lined the walls, each one trembling now, vibrating with some hidden force. The fluorescent lights flickered harder, plunging me into brief slices of darkness. In those moments, I saw things I couldn't explain. Faces bulging beneath the jackets, mouths gasping soundlessly, arms straining against straps that weren't there. And I recognized some of them. The laughing woman from the dining hall, the couple who'd frozen mid-gesture, even the waiter who had whispered about danger. Their faces stretched beneath the orange nylon, as if the jackets themselves were coffins of fabric and foam. "All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately." The voice thundered again, shaking the walls. The jackets surged toward me in unison. I darted between them, weaving, gasping, until I reached a side hatch. My hands fumbled at the latch. It was rusted, corroded, like it hadn't been touched in decades. Somehow, I ripped it open and spilled into a narrow service corridor. The hatch slammed behind me. Darkness swallowed me whole. The service corridor wasn't on any deck plan I'd ever seen. Bare steel walls, dripping with condensation, pipes hissing overhead. The air reeked of mold and seawater. I staggered forward, desperate to put distance between me and that chamber of floating jackets. My footsteps echoed too loudly, like there were more than 2 feet hitting the ground. After what felt like forever, I reached another door. No handle. Just a round porthole at face level. I pressed my eye against it and nearly screamed. On the other side was the main atrium of the ship. The grand staircase glittering with chandeliers, passengers in evening clothes strolling across the polished floor. Except they weren't moving naturally. They walked in stiff lines, file after file, each one wearing an orange jacket. Their faces were blank, eyes forward, marching toward exits that weren't supposed to be there. And at the front of the line was the pale man, turning his head just enough to look directly at me through the glass. You see it now, his voice echoed, though no lips moved. You're already part of the count. I staggered back from the porthole, bile rising in my throat. My hands shook so badly I could barely keep them on the wall. Something pressed against my spine. I whirled. Another life jacket lay neatly folded on the corridor floor. Fresh, dry, waiting. I bolted, lungs tearing, feet slamming metal. The corridor tilted under me, pitching like the whole ship had lurched. Alarms wailed somewhere in the distance, muffled, distorted. And above it all, the same metallic order blared once more. All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately. Only this time, it wasn't a voice on the PA. It was inside my head. The corridor shook like a living thing. Pipes clanged, bolts rattled loose, and water dripped from the seams in steady, taunting rhythms. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, trembling, weak, but still moving forward, because if I stopped, the jackets would catch me. The voice inside my skull was louder now, not one voice. Hundreds, layered together, some pleading, some screaming, some whispering so faintly I couldn't tell if they were calling my name or just murmuring fragments of prayers. All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately. The words pulsed behind my eyes, like a migraine that could think. I turned a corner and froze. The corridor ended in a massive steel door. But unlike the others, this one had no handle, no wheel, no obvious way to open it. Just a number stenciled in peeling black paint. 13. My throat closed. There wasn't supposed to be a Deck 13. Everyone knew that. But here it was, painted like a scar in the steel. The voice returned, clearer than ever. Enter. And as if obeying that command, the door creaked inward. A blast of air hit me, heavy with salt and mildew. I stepped forward despite every nerve screaming to run the other way. The room beyond was cavernous, bigger than the ship should have allowed. Rows of lifeboats hung suspended from invisible cables, but they weren't the gleaming white boats from the upper decks. These were ancient. Splintered wood, rotting ropes, sails in tatters. Some of them bore names I recognized from maritime disasters I'd read about. Wilhelm Gustloff, Andrea Doria, Herald of Free Enterprise. Each boat was filled, but not with survivors. With passengers, their faces pale and waxy, mouths slack, eyes glassy. They sat motionless, packed shoulder to shoulder, their orange life jackets cinched so tightly the straps had cut into their skin. And every single head turned toward me. I stumbled backward. No, this isn't. This isn't possible. The pale man appeared again, stepping between two rows of lifeboats. His smile was razor thin. Every disaster needs survivors, he said softly. And every survivor must answer the call. That's why there is a muster. That's why Deck 13 exists. The air thickened. My lungs screamed for oxygen. I tried to back away, but my legs refused to move. Behind me, fabric brushed the floor. I looked down. A life jacket lay at my feet, its straps uncoiled like snakes. No, my voice cracked. I'm not part of this. The pale man tilted his head. You already heard the call. You already stepped off the elevator. You're one of us now. The strap snapped around my wrists and chest, pulling tight. I fought, clawing, thrashing, but the nylon burned against my skin, cinching tighter with every struggle. The air vanished from my lungs. I screamed, but no sound came. The pale man leaned close, his face filling my vision. Welcome to muster, passenger. The world folded in on itself. When I woke, I was sitting in a lifeboat, my body stiff, my arms bound by straps. Around me, rows of blank-faced passengers stared forward, breathing in perfect unison. The sound was mechanical, like pistons rising and falling. I tried to turn, to move, to scream. Nothing. My voice was gone. My body wasn't mine anymore. Across the deck, I saw another figure. A woman, terrified. She had just entered the cavernous chamber, eyes wide, frozen in horror exactly as I had been. And I understood. I was part of the scene now, waiting, watching. Another ghost in the muster drill. The voice filled the room one final time. All passengers, report to your muster stations immediately. And this time, I answered silently, because I had no choice. If you're still listening, don't ever ignore the emergency drill on a cruise ship. And whatever you do, if the elevator stops on a floor that doesn't exist, don't step off. Not everyone who musters ever comes back. For more chilling, true encounter-style horror, dim the lights, subscribe to Untold Happenings, and hit that bell icon, because the next call might be for you. I didn't want to take this cruise in the first place. My girlfriend Emma had been begging for months. Cheap rates, Caribbean itinerary, her parents could watch our dog for a week. I gave in because saying no felt selfish. I didn't realize that agreeing to step onto that floating palace would mean stepping into something I can't explain. Something that's been rotting in the back of my mind since we came back. The first day was normal enough. Luggage mix-ups, welcome drinks, mandatory safety drill. Typical cruise stuff. The ship was massive, like a hotel stitched together with endless hallways and carpet that smelled faintly of chlorine and something metallic. We explored, got lost, laughed about it. By nightfall, we were drunk on cocktails, half sunburned, and too tired to unpack. But that night, the knocking started. It was soft, like fingertips against wood. 3 taps. Not our door, the one across the hall. Cabin 329. At first, I thought nothing of it. Some drunk guest locked out, or maybe kids messing around. But I noticed something strange. No one answered. The knocking just stopped, like whoever was inside decided to stay silent. I looked at Emma, she looked back, and we shrugged it off. The next morning, walking past 329, I slowed down. The door looked older than the others. Same number plate, but the finish was worn, like it hadn't been repainted in years. A do not disturb sign hung crooked, the string frayed. That evening after dinner, the knocking returned. Same 3 taps. I opened our peephole to check. The hallway was empty, I'm telling you. The sound came from that door, but no one stood there. Just stillness. A hallway humming with the ship's vibration. I didn't mention it to Emma that night. On the 3rd day, I saw something that cemented my unease. We were headed to the pool when I noticed the cabin door across the hall cracked open, maybe an inch. A pale hand, long fingers, gripped the edge of the door from inside. I froze. My mouth went dry. Whoever it was didn't move, didn't peek out. Just held the door, like they wanted me to know they were there. When Emma asked what was wrong, I said I forgot my sunglasses and dragged her away. I couldn't shake it, though. I even asked the receptionist casually later, "Hey, is anyone staying in 329? The folks across from us are kinda weird." She blinked, tapped her computer, then frowned. "Sir, cabin 329 isn't booked for this voyage." My stomach turned. "You sure? Someone's in there." She shook her head politely. "Not possible. That cabin is unavailable." That night, the knocking came again. 3 taps. Pause. Then 3 more. I leaned against our door, listening, my breath fogging the peephole. The air smelled like damp wood, like old water damage. Emma whispered, "Don't open it." I swore I wouldn't. But then, faintly, through the door of 329, I heard a man's voice. Deep, strained, like his throat was ruined. "Let me out." I swear, my heart stopped. The words weren't meant for me. They were muffled, like he was begging whoever was inside with him. I pulled back, trembling, and Emma grabbed my arm. We didn't sleep that night. When morning came, the door across the hall stood wide open. Inside, I could see a cabin stripped bare. No bed, no curtains, just exposed metal walls like a storage unit. And in the middle of the floor, scratched deep into the steel, were the words, "Stay out." We packed to move cabins immediately. I wanted to demand answers, but every time I caught the staff's eye, it was like they already knew what I'd seen. One crew member even whispered, "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." That should have been enough for me to shut down, but I made a mistake. I couldn't stop myself from recording voice notes about what was happening. I told myself I'd upload them later, maybe even share them with people who'd believe me. If you're listening now, I need you to do me a favor. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this story. Because if what's happening to me is real, someone else is going to hear those knocks too. And maybe it's better if you know what not to do when they start. The fourth night, I woke to Emma screaming. She was pointing at our door. From beneath it, something was sliding in, a thin sheet of paper. I bent down, hands shaking, and picked it up. It was an old cruise manifest, yellowed and brittle. The passenger list had been blacked out, every name scribbled through with thick ink, except one. At the bottom, written clear as day, Daniel Weaver, cabin 329. That's not my name, but I'll be damned if my legs didn't buckle reading it. And when I looked up, I realized Emma wasn't breathing. Emma wasn't breathing. Her chest was still, her lips parted like she had stopped mid-scream. For a moment, the world shrank to just that detail, the rise and fall that wasn't there. I shook her hard, calling her name over and over, and then, like nothing had happened, she gasped. Her eyes flew open, pupils blown wide, and she sucked in air with a ragged sob. I was crying without realizing it. "Emma, you scared the hell out of me." She blinked, confused, then clutched my shirt. "Why were you just standing there?" "What? I wasn't?" My throat tightened. She thought I'd been watching. That day, I couldn't eat. The buffet smelled rancid, like spoiled seafood, though everyone else was piling their plates. Emma acted fine, almost too fine, like she didn't want to talk about what happened. She avoided mentioning the paper, the manifest with the name that wasn't mine, but felt like it was. I folded the brittle sheet into my pocket and kept it there, the ink staining my fingertips. Later, I decided to confront the staff. I waited until Emma was at a yoga class and went down to the reception desk. The young man there smiled too brightly. "How can I help you, sir?" "I need to talk about cabin 329. His smile didn't falter, but his hand froze halfway to the keyboard. "I'm sorry, sir. That cabin is unassigned. Was there a problem with noise?" "Yes, knocking, voices, and someone slid something under our door last night." I pulled out the manifest and slapped it on the counter. "Explain this." He stared at it too long, not like he was confused, but like he recognized it. His smile cracked a fraction, then returned. "One moment, sir." He disappeared through a door behind the desk and didn't come back. Another staff member replaced him within a minute, cheerful, oblivious. "Next, please." That was the last time I saw that receptionist. That night, Emma begged me to request a cabin change again. The manager's office was closed when we tried. The front desk told us everything was fully booked, but I caught the way their eyes flicked to 329 when they said it, like they were checking if I'd push harder. I almost did, but then the knocking started again. Not 3 taps this time, constant, rhythmic pounding, like fists slamming against metal. I staggered to the peephole. The hallway was dark, even though the overhead lights usually stayed on all night. And in that darkness, I saw the door to 329, trembling with every blow. Emma whispered, "Don't." She gripped my arm so tight her nails dug crescent moons into my skin. The pounding stopped. And then, a voice, low, guttural, pressing against the silence like it was breathing down the hall. "Weaver, open the door!" I swear it said my last name. My real last name. We didn't sleep. By morning, Emma had packed her bag, insisting we find the captain directly. She wouldn't take no for an answer. But when we finally reached the bridge, a crewman blocked us at the stairs. His polite smile didn't reach his eyes. "Guests aren't allowed beyond this point," Emma snapped. "Then get the captain, now!" He tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something only he could hear. Then he said, The captain already knows, and he shut the stairwell door in our faces. That was the moment I realized we weren't just being ignored. We were being managed. Herded. Like they'd been through this before. Back in our cabin, exhausted, I tried to sleep. I dreamed of water flooding through the walls, soaking the carpet, of pale hands pushing against the ceiling as if they were trapped above us, pressing to get out. When I woke, the carpet really was damp, not wet enough to slosh, but wet enough that my socks stuck to it when I stood. Emma touched the damp patch and pulled back, shaking. "Salt water," she whispered. We knew we weren't in danger of sinking. This wasn't a leak. This was something else. That evening, while Emma showered, I sat on the bed with the manifest in my lap, tracing the blacked-out names. I noticed something I hadn't before. Under the thick strokes, faint impressions of letters still bled through. If I tilted the paper under the cabin's lamp, I could make them out. One of them was Emma's full name, and right below it, my own, but not my handwriting. The letters looked carved, scratched into the paper itself. I dropped it like it burned. Then the shower shut off. Emma stepped out, pale, shivering, a towel wrapped around her. She didn't look at me. "Who were you talking to?" she asked softly. I wasn't talking. Her face drained of color. "Yes, you were. You said, 'Let me out.'" I didn't argue. Because she wasn't wrong. Somewhere deep in my chest, a part of me had said it. And I was starting to wonder if cabin 329 was waiting for me to listen. The night I finally heard someone breathing inside cabin 329 was the night I stopped pretending we were safe. Emma had finally fallen asleep, her body curled against mine like she was bracing against waves. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The damp patch on the carpet hadn't dried. It had spread. A faint line of moisture now snaked all the way to the door, glistening in the low light like something had been dragged across the floor. I tried to ignore it, but then came the sound. Slow, deliberate inhales and exhales. Not muffled, not distant. The door to 329 was less than 6 feet from ours, and the breath rose and fell like whoever was inside was standing directly on the other side, their mouth inches from the wood. I pressed my ear to our door, holding my breath so I wouldn't mistake mine for theirs. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Steady, patient, waiting. I whispered, "Emma." She stirred, but I didn't wake her. Maybe I didn't want her to hear. Because then came the whisper, low, rasping. "Weaver, come back." Every muscle in my body turned to ice. I forced myself away from the door, sat on the bed, stared at the manifest on the table. The black strokes over our names almost looked wet now, like the ink had bled overnight. My phone buzzed. A notification. I snatched it up, praying it was a message from the front desk or the cruise app. It wasn't. It was a voicemail. The timestamp, 3 a.m. The sender, unknown number. I pressed play with trembling fingers. The recording was only 4 seconds long, but in those 4 seconds I heard my own voice whisper, "Don't open the door." I dropped the phone. It hit the damp carpet with a muted thud, screen flickering. That was the first time I realized it wasn't just Emma losing time, it was me. The next morning, Emma demanded we go back to the front desk. She was pale, her eyes bloodshot, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. She didn't even wait for the receptionist to ask what she needed. She slammed her keycard onto the counter. "We want off this ship." The receptionist glanced down at the card, then at Emma. Their smile dimmed. "Ma'am, our next port is tomorrow morning. Disembarkation isn't possible until then." "Then, switch our cabin," she snapped. "We don't care where, just not there." The receptionist hesitated, then looked around as if checking if anyone else was listening. They lowered their voice. "That room isn't active in our system." "I'll try, but—" Behind them, a uniformed officer appeared, tall, sharp features wearing the gold-trimmed jacket that marked him as security. Problem here? The receptionist froze. Emma said, "Yes, we need to be moved. Cabin 329 is 329. The officer repeated, his eyes narrowing. He gave the receptionist a look that silenced them instantly. Then he turned back to us with a practiced smile. "We'll take care of it." But he didn't ask for our names. Didn't write anything down. Just guided us away from the desk with a hand on my shoulder, steering us back toward the elevators. As we rode up, I caught our reflection in the mirrored panel. Only, for a split second, there was a third person standing between Emma and me. A pale man in a soaked uniform, water dripping down his face, his lips forming the words, "Stay." The lights flickered, and he was gone. When we reached our floor, the officer stepped out first, gesturing, "This way." But instead of leading us to a new room, he stopped in front of 329. "Wait," I said. Emma backed away. "No." The officer knocked 3 times, hard, and from inside the cabin something knocked back. My stomach dropped. He turned to us, his smile never wavering. "See? Occupied. Must have been a mistake in the system. Enjoy the rest of your cruise." And just like that, he left. Emma clutched my arm so tight I thought she'd break it. We stumbled back into our own cabin, bolted the door, and sat in silence. I wanted to comfort her, to say something normal, like everything would be okay tomorrow when we reached port. But I couldn't. Because I finally understood the truth. Cabin 329 wasn't empty. It never had been. And the thing inside knew my name. The hours until port felt endless, like time itself was stretching just to keep us trapped. Emma refused to leave the cabin. She sat against the wall with her knees to her chest, trembling at every creak of the ship. I kept telling myself we'd be fine once morning came, once we could walk off this cursed vessel and never look back. But then 3 a.m. arrived again. I was staring at the digital clock on the nightstand when the colon blinked once, and suddenly it wasn't glowing red anymore. It was glowing blue, a watery, shifting blue, like light refracting through waves. And right on cue, the phone on the desk rang. Emma whimpered, covering her ears. "Don't answer it." I didn't move. The shrill ring filled the room, bouncing off the walls until it felt like it was inside my skull. When it finally clicked to voicemail, I snatched up the phone just to stop the sound. The new message icon blinked. With my heart pounding, I pressed play. It was Emma's voice, but not her now. Her from earlier that day. Panicked, begging, "Don't follow him, don't let him open the door." I dropped the phone. My blood ran cold. Before I could process it, a knock rattled our door. Not 3 polite taps. A violent pounding knock that shook the hinges. Emma screamed. I stumbled forward, but something stopped me dead. A shadow spilled under the crack of the door, not like feet blocking light, but like liquid darkness spreading into our cabin, creeping toward my shoes. And then, from the other side, my own voice whispered, "It's me. Open up." I staggered back, shaking my head. No, that's not." Emma was sobbing, rocking back and forth. "We just have to wait for morning. Just wait for morning." But the knocking didn't stop. It became a rhythm, like the beating of a heart. The shadow spread wider, soaking into the carpet like ink. The air grew colder, saltier, until I could almost taste the ocean in my lungs. The door handle turned. I grabbed it with both hands, forcing it back, fighting against something pulling from the other side. My arms burned. My chest heaved, and as I struggled, I heard dozens of voices whispering in unison. "Weaver, come back, finish the voyage." Emma screamed louder, "Don't let it in." And then, silence. The handle went still. The shadow under the door receded. I collapsed onto the damp carpet, gasping, every muscle shaking. Emma crawled to me, clutching my face, her tears hot against my skin. "We just need to survive until morning," she whispered again and again, like a prayer. But the thing was, I wasn't sure morning would come. I glanced at the clock. The blue glow was gone. It read 2:17 a.m. We hadn't gained time. We'd lost it. When daylight finally bled through the curtains, Emma and I didn't speak. We just clutched our bags and waited for the announcement that passengers could disembark. Every second felt stolen, like the ship might change its mind and keep us forever. The intercom crackled at last. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Nassau. We'll begin disembarkation shortly. Please have your cards ready." Emma bolted upright, relief flooding her face. We made it. I wanted to believe her. I really did. We joined the river of passengers flowing toward the gangway. Everyone laughed and snapped pictures, oblivious. Emma squeezed my hand so tight, her knuckles turned white. I kept glancing behind us, expecting to see the uniformed officer or that soaked man from the elevator. But no one stopped us. At the bottom of the gangway, a staff member scanned cards and directed people ashore. When it was our turn, I handed mine over. He swiped it, frowned, then swiped it again. "Sorry, sir. Invalid." My chest tightened. "What do you mean, invalid? That's my card." He glanced at the screen, then at me. His voice softened. "Sir, this cabin isn't on the manifest." Emma's card scanned green. She pulled me forward. "He's with me. Let him off." The staff member hesitated. For a second, I thought he'd argue. But then he looked past me, back toward the ship, and his expression changed. Fear flickered across his face. He thrust my card back into my hand. "Go, now." We didn't wait. We ran down the dock, through customs, into the humid air of Nassau. Emma was laughing and crying at the same time. "We're out! We're out!" I wanted to laugh with her. I wanted to feel free. But when I pulled my phone from my pocket, the screen lit up with a new voicemail. Timestamp: 3 a.m. I pressed play before I could stop myself. It was Emma's voice. But not her now. Not happy, not relieved. Her voice was flat, distant, echoing. "Why did you leave me in the cabin?" I froze. My stomach turned. I looked up. Emma was a few steps ahead, smiling, waving down a taxi. The sun was bright on her hair, her face glowing with life. But for the briefest moment, her reflection in the taxi window didn't wave, didn't smile. It just stared back at me with black, water-filled eyes and whispered, "Voyage incomplete." The voicemail kept playing, overlapping with the sound of gulls and waves. My own voice joined hers, hollow, inhuman. "Come back. Finish the voyage." That was when I realized Emma never made it off the ship. And maybe I didn't either. Story 3. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, but instead of the polished hallway I knew so well, the display above the door glowed with a number that should never have been there. 13. There was no Deck 13 on the ship. "My name's Aaron Wells. I'm 31, from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I work as an IT systems administrator. The kind of guy who spends way too much time in server rooms and barely sees the sun. I'd booked this cruise as a kind of reset after a brutal breakup and months of stress at work. My friends told me I needed to get out, meet people, let loose. The ship promised endless food, live shows, and the Atlantic stretching endlessly in every direction. I thought a week away would be enough to clear my head, but I wasn't prepared for what I saw that night. I'd been restless, riding the elevators just to wander. Maybe it sounds strange, but walking the ship calmed me. The hum of the engines under my feet, the faint smell of salt air seeping in through vents, the dim glow of fluorescent lights on endless carpeted hallways. It was hypnotic. That night, I pressed the button for Deck 8. The doors closed, and the lift hummed as it descended. Then came the chime. Not 8, not even 9 or 10. 13. The digital display glowed that impossible number, red against the steel frame. My stomach dropped. I should have stepped back, should have pressed another button, but I just stared as the doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the corridor wasn't like the rest of the ship. The carpeting was threadbare, patterned in faded swirls that looked water-damaged. The walls were off-color, stained with a yellowish tint. The air felt thicker, heavy, like I was breathing through cloth, and it was silent. No background hum of engines, no distant chatter. Just nothing. A woman behind me whispered, "There isn't a deck 13." Her voice was trembling. But then, despite that fear, she stepped forward. The doors stayed open as she crossed the threshold. I swear I reached out to stop her, but she didn't even look back. Her shoes tapped against the uneven floor as she disappeared down that corridor. The doors stayed open. I waited, expecting her to return. She never did. That was the last normal moment of the cruise for me. I stood frozen, staring at the corridor beyond the elevator like it might breathe and pull me in. The digital display above my head still read 13 in a steady red glow. Every deck map, every brochure, every emergency drill I'd sat through, they all skipped directly from 12 to 14. And yet, here it was, yawning open before me like a wound in the ship itself. The woman's footsteps had already faded into silence, swallowed up by that strange hallway. I listened for her voice, a laugh, anything, but nothing came back, just the faint creak of metal deep inside the ship. The elevator doors began to close, and for a second, I thought I was safe. But then something cold brushed the back of my neck, like the air had shifted direction, and the doors jerked open again without me touching a button. I backed into the corner of the lift. The corridor seemed to lean toward me. That carpet, patterned in swirls that looked like tide pools, seemed darker now, soaked into the floor. A man in a Hawaiian shirt, clearly drunk, stumbled into the elevator beside me. He glanced up, squinting at the glowing 13. "There's no 13, he muttered with a laugh. "Man, that's bad luck." But when the door stayed open, his amusement faltered. His eyes darted down the hall. He licked his lips, shrugged, and before I could stop him, he stepped off the elevator. "Wait, don't!" My voice cracked. But he was already walking, and like the woman, his footsteps echoed and then faded too quickly, like the hall had swallowed the sound. The elevator shuddered. The lights flickered. And I realized the control panel inside no longer showed any buttons. No deck 8, no deck 9, no way to call the lift anywhere else. Just the glowing red 13. I should have hit the alarm. I should have screamed for help. Instead, I found myself staring down that hall, wondering how long the doors would stay open, wondering what would happen if I waited. And then I heard it, a faint scrape, like something dragging across the carpet. Slow, steady, getting closer. That was the last moment I could still tell myself I wasn't trapped. The scrape kept going, steady, deliberate, like someone dragging a suitcase with one broken wheel, but it wasn't metallic. It was softer, heavier, like something wet being pulled across the carpet. I pressed myself into the far corner of the elevator. The glow of the display above my head washed the space in red, making the steel walls look streaked with blood. My hand hovered over the emergency phone panel, but when I pried it open, the cradle was empty, just dangling wires. The scrape paused. Then came a sound I will never forget. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the wall just around the corner of that impossible hallway. I whispered to myself, "Don't move, don't answer." A figure passed the far end of the corridor, just a shadow at first. Too tall, too thin. It didn't walk like a person. It seemed to glide, its shoulders brushing the walls though the space was wide. I only saw it for a second before it melted into the darkness, but my throat tightened. My mind kept trying to insist I'd misseen it. I wasn't the only one noticing. The elevator chimed again. A young couple wandered up, mid-20s, holding hands, dressed for the midnight buffet. They laughed about being lost until the woman spotted the glowing 13 above the door. "There's no 13, she said, her voice playful, but thin around the edges. The man smirked. "It's just a glitch." He leaned in and whispered something to her, but I caught the words "bad luck." And then, with the casual confidence of someone who's had too much champagne, he stepped forward. "Don't!" I barked. My voice cracked. He turned, surprised at my tone, but he only chuckled and pulled his girlfriend with him. She hesitated at the threshold, her eyes flicking toward me as if she wanted me to give her a reason not to go. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, and then they were gone. The silence that followed was deeper than before, like the ship itself was holding its breath. I waited for their voices, for footsteps, for the sound of the door opening again somewhere down the corridor. Nothing. I realized my own breathing was too loud. Each exhale fogged in the air, though the cabin wasn't cold when I'd stepped in. The temperature had dropped sharply. My teeth began to chatter. I jabbed the control panel again. No buttons. Just the red 13. That's when I noticed something strange about the carpet. From where I stood in the elevator, the pattern looked like swirls of waves, except the shapes shifted when I blinked, curling into spirals that seemed to move. Like the tide rolling in and out. A memory hit me. The woman who'd stepped off first, her footsteps fading unnaturally fast. The drunk man who never looked back. The couple who vanished into silence. I'd watched 4 people step into that hallway, and none had come back. The scrape started again, closer this time. That was the moment I should have pressed myself against the back wall and prayed the doors would close. But I leaned forward instead, just slightly, as if my curiosity outweighed my fear. My eyes locked on the bend in the hall, waiting for the source of that dragging sound to round the corner. When it finally did, the lights in the corridor flickered. It wasn't a person. Something lay slumped against the wall, moving inch by inch. At first, I thought it was a bundle of wet towels, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw it had arms. They were too long, bending at wrong angles, and the fingers clawed at the wall for leverage. Its head lolled forward, hair plastered to its face as if it had just risen from the ocean. The elevator groaned, the doors twitched, trying to close. The thing jerked its head up at the sound, and for the first time I saw its eyes. They were human eyes, but too many of them. I slammed my palm against the side of the elevator, desperate for anything that would send me back up to safety. The thing shrieked, a sound like metal tearing in half, and began dragging itself faster. The doors closed, the elevator dropped. And when it finally stopped, the glowing number above the door still read 13. That was the moment I realized there might not be a way back. The doors opened again, and I braced myself for the familiar hallway with its faded carpet and suffocating silence. Instead, I was staring at something worse. The corridor had shifted. It was longer now, stretching into shadows that seemed to bend away from the light. The pattern on the carpet rippled faintly as though water was flowing beneath it. The air carried a briny tang, sharp and stale, like the ocean trapped in a cellar. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself not to move. If I stayed in the elevator, maybe, just maybe, the doors would close again and take me somewhere safe. But the panel still showed only that one glowing number, 13. No other buttons, no call switch, no alarm. The silence pressed against me, and then the softest whisper leaked through the corridor. "Help me." It was faint, like a voice underwater, but it was enough to make me lurch forward. Against every sane instinct, I stepped off the elevator. My sneakers sank slightly into the carpet, as though it was damp. The doors slid shut behind me with a hiss, leaving me stranded. I froze. The lights overhead buzzed, then flickered, and for a split second the walls looked different. No longer wallpapered and paneled, but steel ribs slick with condensation. The corridor seemed alive. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Is anyone?" Something slammed behind me. I spun, but the elevator was gone. Just smooth wall. My breath caught. I reached out, pressing my palm to the cold surface where the doors had been. There was no seam, no evidence the elevator had ever existed. That was when the whisper came again. Clearer, closer. "Help, please." The voice was female. It sounded like the woman who had stepped off first, the one I never saw return. I swallowed hard and walked, each step squelching slightly against the damp carpet. The hall branched left and right, both directions disappearing into dim, endless stretches. A soft glow pulsed faintly down the right corridor, like a lantern swaying in the dark. I chose left. I don't know why. Maybe because the glow felt like bait. The further I went, the colder the air became. I hugged my arms around myself, rubbing at my skin. My breath fogged in front of me. That's when I noticed the walls. The wallpaper was peeling, curling back to reveal black steel. On some sections, the paper was shredded entirely, claw marks running deep into the metal beneath. I stopped walking. My ears strained. Somewhere ahead, I heard it again, that scraping sound. Slow, wet. I should have turned back. But when I did, the hallway behind me wasn't empty anymore. At least a dozen doors lined the corridor now, where before there had been none. Each door was wooden, swollen with moisture, some with numbers etched faintly into the surface. But they weren't in order. 312, 7, 96, 1104. Cabins that shouldn't exist. One of the doors rattled violently, like someone was pounding from the other side. I froze. Then came the muffled scream, a man's voice. "Let me out, please! Somebody open the door!" I staggered back, heart hammering. The door marked 96 bulged outward with each slam. But the handle didn't move, like it wasn't meant to open from my side. The screaming stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed was worse. I turned and bolted down the hall, past the numbered doors, past the peeling walls, until I reached another junction. My lungs burned. My hands shook. I leaned against the wall to steady myself. That's when I heard the whisper again, directly behind me this time. "Aaron." I spun. No one was there. I don't know how long I stood there, pressed against the wall, my chest rising and falling like I'd just run a marathon. I wasn't alone. That much I knew. My name, whispered in the dark, still echoed inside my skull. I forced myself forward, the corridor stretching endlessly, every step heavier than the last. Then, without warning, the hall opened into a wider chamber. My first thought was that it looked like the ship's lounge, but rotted, ruined, and abandoned. Chairs sat overturned, upholstery torn open, and spilling stuffing like entrails. The carpet was stained dark in large, irregular patches, and when I stepped on them, I swore they were wet. The air reeked of mildew and salt, as if this place had been submerged long ago. And in the center of the room, under the dim glow of a single swaying light, stood a group of passengers. At least a dozen of them, facing away from me. They weren't moving. Just standing shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed. Their clothes looked wrong, faded, out of time. A man in suspenders, a woman in a 1950s sundress. Another in a crew uniform I'd never seen before. "Hello?" My voice cracked. The group didn't answer, but one of them, the woman in the sundress, turned her head. Her neck bent too far, like her bones had softened. Her face was gray, lips cracked and peeling. Yet her eyes, they were sharp, alive. She smiled. The others slowly began to turn as well. Their movements weren't synchronized, just jittery and broken, like marionettes on tangled strings. When their faces came into view, my stomach flipped. Every single one of them looked familiar. I'd seen them boarding earlier this week, passengers who had gone missing. The man with the suspenders had been at the pool bar. The kid near the back, still wearing his ball cap, had been part of a family who vanished 2 nights ago. The woman in the sundress, God, I remembered her laugh at dinner just 3 evenings before. I stumbled back. My heel caught on a chair leg and I nearly fell. That broke the silence. All of them raised their heads at once, eyes locking onto me. And then, like puppets dropped on a stage, they collapsed. Limbs slack, bodies crumpling into the damp carpet. I wanted to believe it was over, that they were gone. But then, in unison, they began to crawl. Not toward the exits, not toward the walls, toward me. Their hands slapped wetly against the carpet. Their fingernails left grooves as they dragged themselves forward, mouths opening wide. Some whispered, some moaned, and some called my name. I ran. I bolted across the lounge, weaving between chairs, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Behind me, the sound of crawling grew louder, closer. I didn't dare look back. I just ran until I found another hallway, another chance at escape. The corridor stretched long and narrow, lined with mirrors instead of doors. My reflection flashed again and again as I sprinted past, until one of them didn't. I stopped cold. In the mirror to my left, my reflection wasn't moving. It just stood there, watching me. Its face pale and gaunt. My chest rose and fell, but the reflection's chest stayed still. Its mouth began to curl into a smile, slow and deliberate. Then its hand pressed against the inside of the glass. The surface rippled, and my reflection began to push its way through. I didn't think. I just threw myself backward, stumbling against the opposite wall, eyes locked on that mirror. My reflection, no, the thing that looked like me, was halfway out. Its arm was pale and wet, its fingers long and trembling. The grin on its face was a perfect mockery of mine, stretched too wide, like someone had carved it in place. It whispered in a voice so low it rattled my bones. "Stay." I bolted again. I didn't care where the corridor led. My legs burned, lungs screaming for air, but the mirrors kept coming, each one warped, reflecting things I didn't want to see. In some, I was missing my eyes. In others, I hung from the ceiling like a lifeless puppet. And in one, I wasn't alone. Shadows with hands too many to count clung to me like parasites. Finally, the mirrors ended. The hallway spat me out into another chamber, this one lit only by a red glow, as if the ship itself had a beating heart deep inside it. The walls were metal, but they pulsed faintly, and the air smelled of rust and seawater. And then I saw the elevator. It stood in the middle of the room, its doors open, waiting. But the number above it wasn't glowing with 13 anymore. It was blank, flickering static. I should have turned back. I should have hidden, prayed, done anything but step forward. Yet something about that elevator pulled me in. My feet moved on their own, like gravity had shifted, dragging me toward the doors. As I got closer, the static cleared for a split second, and I saw the number again. Deck 0. My gut twisted. There wasn't a Deck 0. Hell, there wasn't supposed to be a Deck 13 either. But before I could stop myself, the doors snapped shut. The elevator jolted. The floor vibrated. The walls shuddered. And I felt my stomach lurch like the whole ship had tipped. We weren't going up or down. It felt like we were sinking. The panel lit up one by one. Numbers counting backward. 12, 13, 14. Each floor we passed, I heard something new in the walls. First laughter, then screaming, then pounding fists. By the time it hit 2, the sound was unbearable. Dozens, maybe hundreds of voices, crying, shouting, begging. And then we stopped. The doors slid open. I didn't step out right away. The air was colder than anything I'd felt before, sharp enough to sting my skin. It carried the unmistakable smell of the ocean, salt, algae, and something far fouler. When I finally forced myself to look, my legs almost gave out. I wasn't on the ship anymore. I was standing at the edge of a massive, endless dock. Above me stretched a black sky with no stars. The ocean rolled dark and silent, waves moving sluggishly like thick oil. And lined up along the dock were hundreds of passengers. Some were fresh, wearing clothes from this voyage. Others looked decades old, their faces sunken, their clothes rotted. Yet all of them stared blankly out at the water, waiting. Behind them, figures in crew uniforms moved silently. But these weren't people. Their faces were blurred, their limbs too long. Each one carried a tray of glasses filled with a dark liquid that rippled, though the air was still. They offered them to the passengers one by one, and every person who accepted a glass stepped off the dock, walking calmly into the black water without a splash. My stomach dropped when I recognized some of the faces. The missing passengers, the ones the staff claimed had disembarked early. And then, among them, I saw someone else, my reflection. It was standing in line, waiting patiently, smiling that terrible smile. And as the crew handed it a glass, it turned its head. It looked right at me. The glass rose in a silent toast. And then it whispered, without moving its lips, "Your turn." My chest locked tight. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. That reflection, my double, was still holding up the glass, waiting for me to join the line. The other passengers didn't move. They didn't blink. They just shuffled one by one into the sea, swallowed by that black water, as if it had been waiting for them all along. The crew, figures, faceless and wrong, drifted closer. One of them stopped right in front of me. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. The tray tilted, offering me a single glass. The liquid inside rippled like it was alive. I shook my head, backing away. No, I'm not drinking that. But the thing that wore my face laughed without sound. It stepped forward, raised its own glass, and drank. The dark fluid ran down its chin, staining its teeth, its grin stretching wider and wider until the edges of its mouth split. And then, like a broken reel of film, it stepped sideways into the water, gone in an instant. I felt a pull, as if invisible hands had hooked into my ribs, dragging me toward the dock. My heels scraped the floor. My nails clawed at the wood. The faceless crew didn't move. They didn't have to. The ocean itself wanted me. I screamed, forcing every bit of strength into my legs, and stumbled back toward the elevator. The doors were still open, glowing faintly. My only way out. I dove inside, slamming my fists against the close button. The faceless servers tilted their heads as if in disappointment. The passengers kept walking into the water, and just before the doors shut, I heard the ocean whisper, not in words, but in a chorus of voices I recognized. Passengers, crew, children, old men, all blending into one thought. You'll be back. The doors slammed shut, the elevator lurched violently, and the numbers on the panel began to climb. This time upward. 0, 1, 2, 3. My ears popped, my body weightless, as if I were being launched instead of lifted. When the shaking stopped, the panel glowed with a familiar number. 11. The doors opened. And just like that, I was back on the cruise ship. Bright lights. Music drifting from the lounge. Laughter echoing in the hall. A couple walked past me, glancing at me strangely, like I was just another drunk passenger. It was as if nothing had happened. Except, when I looked down, I saw water pooling at my feet. Not clear water. Black. Thick. Slowly seeping from my shoes, staining the carpet as I walked. I rushed to the nearest crew desk, babbling about Deck 13, about the dock, about the drinks. The woman at the counter smiled politely, tapping something on her screen. "Sir, there's no Deck 13, she said. "Perhaps you meant Deck 12? I slammed my hands on the desk. "No, I saw it. I was there." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes flicked down to the wet footprints I was leaving. And then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she said, "We'll clean that up before the others notice." I froze. She wasn't typing into a computer at all. The screen in front of her was static. The reflection of my face stared back at me from the black glass, smiling, raising a glass in a toast. That was the last memory I have before waking up in my cabin, soaked, clothes stiff with dried seawater. The official log says nothing. The crew insists I never left my room that night. But I know the truth. Deck 13 exists, and it's waiting. If you've ever heard whispers about cruise ships hiding decks that don't appear on the maps, let me know in the comments. Some stories on Reddit sound terrifyingly similar to what I went through. And if you're brave enough to keep listening, subscribe to Untold Happenings. There are more encounters like this, and they're only getting darker. Story 6. I booked the cruise on a whim. Work had been grinding me down, and the cheap last-minute deal felt like fate. 5 nights at sea, all-inclusive. A chance to shut the world out. The email confirmation looked normal enough, though one detail stuck out. Cabin 4107. When I tried Googling the deck plans, that number never showed up. Every site I checked skipped from 4106 straight to 4108. But the confirmation was clear. I figured it was just outdated schematics. Ships get remodeled all the time, right? Still, when I stepped onto the ship, suitcase rattling behind me, something about the place felt wrong. Too quiet. The welcome music playing through the speakers had a faint distortion, like an old cassette tape. Crew members smiled, but their eyes didn't follow you the way people's usually do. When I showed my boarding pass at the reception desk, the attendant's smile froze. She glanced at the paper, then at her computer, then back at me. "Cabin 4107? She repeated slowly, like she wasn't sure she'd read it right. "Yeah," I said. "Is there a problem?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "No problem, sir. Enjoy your stay." But when she handed back the card key, her hand trembled. The elevator ride up was strangely silent, no music, no chatter. When the doors opened onto Deck 4, the hallway stretched out in perfect symmetry. Numbered doors lined neatly down both sides. 4105, 4106, then a blank wall. Number 4107. My heart sank. For a moment I thought I'd been scammed, but then I noticed something, an indentation in the wall. Faint, like the outline of a sealed doorway. And when I swiped my keycard against the blank panel, there was a soft click. The wall slid open. Inside, the cabin looked normal enough. Bed, desk, small bathroom, slightly musty, like it hadn't been aired out in years, but nothing extraordinary. Except for the smell, salt water, sharp, briny, clinging to everything. I set my suitcase down and opened the porthole curtain. Instead of the open sea, I was staring at another wall, just a blank expanse of steel, like the cabin was wedged against some hidden bulkhead. No view, no light. And taped to the desk, yellowed and curling at the edges, was a piece of paper with 4 words scrawled in shaky handwriting: "Don't stay the night." I told myself it was a prank, maybe some past guest messing with future occupants. Still, the note stuck in my mind. The rest of the day passed like a blur. I explored the ship, wandered the buffet, sat on the sundeck. Everything seemed normal. Loud families, kids splashing in the pool, retirees clutching tropical drinks. But the longer I stayed among the noise, the more I felt like I didn't belong there. My thoughts kept circling back to that door, that wall, that hidden room. When I finally returned to my cabin, the hallway looked different. Dimmer, and I swear there were fewer passengers walking past. The wall opened again when I swiped my keycard. I half expected it wouldn't. Inside, the air was colder than before. Damp, like underground concrete. And something new waited on the desk. A glass of water, half full, beads of condensation on the outside, fresh. I hadn't left it there. I didn't touch it. I didn't even want to breathe too close to it. Around midnight, I lay in bed listening. The walls of the cabin weren't silent. They pulsed, groaned. Every so often, I heard what sounded like shifting water, like I was in the belly of the ship, and the ocean pressed just inches from me. At some point, I must have dozed, because I woke to a sound that pulled every hair on my arms upright. Breathing. Slow, wet inhalations coming from the dark corner near the bathroom door. I froze. I didn't move, didn't even blink, just stared. The corner looked empty. But the sound continued. And then, 3 knocks on the inside of my bathroom wall. 3 knocks, muffled through steel, as if someone on the other side wanted me to answer. I scrambled for the lights. The moment they flicked on, silence. Nothing in the corner. But the mirror over the sink dripped with seawater, like waves had splashed against it. The next morning I went to reception. I wanted to switch cabins. No way I was staying in that tomb. When I explained, the receptionist listened politely, typing something into her computer. Then she looked up at me with that same frozen smile. "I'm sorry, sir," she said gently, "but there is no cabin 4107. I just stared at her. "What? I slept there last night." She shook her head slowly. "That cabin doesn't exist." I slammed my keycard onto the desk. "Then, what's this?" She picked it up. Her hand trembled the way the first attendants had. She glanced at the magnetic strip, then quickly slipped it into a drawer beneath the desk. Out of sight. "I'll have someone check on your concern," she whispered, voice low. "But I suggest you don't go back there." Before I could argue, another passenger appeared behind me, complaining loudly about a lost suitcase. The receptionist waved me away. Conversation over. That night, I didn't know where else to go. I lingered on the deck until it was nearly empty, sea wind stinging my face. But eventually, exhaustion pushed me back to that hallway, to that blank stretch of wall. The wall opened at my card's touch, like it had been waiting. Inside, the glass of water on the desk was gone. In its place, there was a journal. Old, leather-bound, the cover warped from moisture. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was jagged, uneven. "If you are reading this, it means the cabin found you too." The journal pages were wrinkled, water-stained, and some ink had bled so badly it looked like veins across the paper. I sat at the desk with the ship's faint vibrations humming beneath me, reading under the dim yellow lamp. "The cabin isn't listed on the manifest. They told me the same thing they probably told you, that it doesn't exist. But it does. It finds you when you're not supposed to be here." I turned the page. My stomach tightened. I checked the blueprints in the library. This hallway doesn't align with the others. The measurements don't add up. Cabin 4107. It's not on the ship. It's inside the ship. The next entry was smeared, but the words I could make out froze me. "Don't drink the water. Don't look in the mirror too long. Don't answer if it knocks." I closed the journal and shoved it away. That was when I heard it again. Breathing, coming from behind the bathroom door. This time it was louder, heavier, with a gurgle at the end of each inhale, like lungs filling with liquid. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling. I told myself not to touch it, not to open it. Then the doorknob turned on its own. I stumbled back as the door creaked an inch open. Darkness inside. The smell of brine rolled out, thick and sour. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. A wet whisper answered. "You." I bolted. Out the cabin, down the hall. I didn't care if the crew said it didn't exist. I wanted distance. But when I turned the corner to the stairwell, I ran into a man in uniform. Security. He caught me by the shoulders. "Easy, sir. What seems to be the problem?" I don't know how to explain this," I stammered. "My cabin. Something's wrong with it. 4107. There's someone in there." His face twitched at the number. Just for a second. Then his expression reset. "Cabin 4107, he asked carefully. "Yes." He didn't write it down. Didn't ask me to show him. He just gave me a stiff nod and said, "I'll handle it." Then he leaned closer, voice dropping low enough only I could hear. "Don't go back there. And whatever you do, don't tell anyone else about the door." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a lounge, staring out at the black ocean until my eyes burned. At some point, a woman sat down across from me. Early 50s, neat gray hair, cruise lanyard still around her neck. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked without preamble. My blood chilled. "Saw what?" "The extra cabin." I didn't answer, but she smiled sadly, like she already knew. "It found my husband on our last trip," she whispered. "He went inside. He never came out." She left before I could ask another word. The next day, I tried to get answers. I searched the ship's library, like the journal mentioned. Most of the books were tourist fluff, but in a binder marked deck plans. I found something odd. On the schematic for this floor, the cabins went 4,105, 4,106, 4,108, number 4,107. But the spacing looked wrong. There was too much empty wall between 4,106 and 4,108, like something had been deliberately erased. When I traced the outline with my finger, I noticed faint pencil markings underneath the print. Someone had scribbled, almost hidden by the overlay. "The drowned don't stay in the water, they want rooms." That night, when I returned to my assigned cabin, the one I'd been relocated to, the keycard didn't work. I went back to reception. The attendant tapped at her keyboard, then frowned. "Strange," she muttered. "It says you've already checked back into your previous cabin." She handed me a new card. The number printed on it made my stomach drop. 4,107. I stood in the lobby staring at the card. The numbers burned into my eyes. 4,107. My pulse hammered against my skull. The receptionist smiled too brightly. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" I wanted to scream at her, to demand another room. But behind her desk drawer, I could hear it. The faint sound of dripping water, steady as a metronome. She tilted her head slightly, like she could hear it too. "No," I muttered, and walked away. The hall toward 4107 was emptier than I'd ever seen it. The carpet muffled my steps, but I swear I could hear another set of footsteps behind me, perfectly in sync with mine. When I reached the wall, it was already open. The door gaped wide like a mouth waiting to swallow me. Inside, the journal lay open on the desk, flipped to a new page. The ink was fresh, the words still glistening. "You can't leave now. The cabin remembers you." The air was colder than before, thick with salt. The mirror in the bathroom was fogged over, though I hadn't run any water. Shapes shifted behind the glass, pale outlines moving as if on the other side of a window. I tried to leave. I really did. But when I yanked the door open, the hallway beyond wasn't right. The carpet was rotted. The lights above flickered, and water trickled down the walls in dark rivulets. I stumbled forward, heart in my throat, and realized I wasn't in a hallway at all. I was in a corridor that no longer belonged to this ship. Cabin doors stretched out on either side, but their numbers were wrong. Faded brass plates read dates instead of digits. 1952, 1974, 1989. Each door had scratches on it, like fingernails clawing from the inside. And somewhere far down that impossible hall, I heard the knock again. 3 slow raps that echoed like they came from every door at once. I backed into my cabin, slamming the door shut. The journal was gone. In its place sat the glass of water again, now filled to the brim, seawater sloshing over the rim, dripping onto the carpet. The knock came from inside my bathroom. This time I didn't wait. I yanked the door open. The mirror had cleared, and for the first time it reflected someone else. A man in a drenched suit, skin gray, lips blue, hair plastered to his forehead. He pressed his hand against the other side of the glass. My own reflection was gone. He opened his mouth, and water poured out. Gallons of it. The mirror cracked. A roar filled the room as seawater burst through, flooding over me. I scrambled to the door, but it wouldn't open. My lungs burned. The last thing I saw before I went under was the figure climbing through the mirror, dripping, smiling, his voice gargling as he whispered, "You're mine now." I woke, coughing on the carpet. Everything was dry. No water, no broken mirror, just silence. I staggered to the door and yanked it open. This time the hallway looked normal. Passengers walked past, like nothing had happened. A family laughed. A child dragged a stuffed dolphin along the floor. But when I looked up at the cabin number, my stomach dropped. Every door in the hall read 4107. Every door, every brass plate gleamed the same, 4107. I spun in a circle, the corridor stretching endlessly, each identical door swallowing the next. The laughter of the family I'd just seen was gone. The hallway was empty now, except for me. and the faint sound of water dripping from the ceiling. I picked a door at random, yanked it open. Inside, the same cabin, same desk, same damp carpet, same mirror. I slammed it shut, tried the next. Same cabin again. Panic clawed my chest. I ran, shoving through doors one after another, and every single one opened into 4107. At some point, the glass of water appeared again. Always half full, always sweating droplets down its sides. Sometimes it was on the desk, sometimes the nightstand. Once, I found it balanced neatly on the edge of the bed waiting for me. I didn't drink it. God, I never drank it. The journal returned too. Pages flipped ahead on their own, ink bleeding across the paper as if being written in real time. Don't try to leave. There is no leaving. The cabin wants company. You will either drink or drown. Time stopped meaning anything. I don't know if hours passed or days. The cruise itinerary, the ports, the other passengers, all of it dissolved. My phone showed no signal. No clock ticked. The only rhythm was the knock, steady and patient. Always 3 raps. Always from the bathroom wall. Once, I pressed my ear against it. I swear I heard voices on the other side, muffled and gurgling, like people shouting underwater. Another time, I glimpsed movement in the mirror, a crowd standing just beyond the cracked glass, faces pale, pressed close together, waiting. I couldn't look long. Their eyes were wrong. When I tried screaming for help, the walls swallowed the sound. When I pounded on the door, no one came. Finally, exhaustion broke me. I collapsed at the desk, staring at the journal. My hand shook as I opened the last page. There was only one line, freshly scrawled in ink that dripped like seawater. Tell the next one. And below it, my name. That's when I understood. The cabin doesn't kill you outright. It keeps you. It makes you part of its cycle. That journal I'd been reading, written by others before me, names long gone, lives erased, but their warnings left behind, pulling the next unlucky soul deeper in. Now it was my turn. I don't know how this story is reaching you. Maybe you're just listening to me ramble in the dark. Maybe you stumbled across a recording that wasn't supposed to exist. But if you're hearing this, I'm begging you, don't ever take a cruise. And if you find yourself on one, don't ever step into a cabin that isn't on the map. Because once the door opens for you, it never closes again. The last sound on the tape is the knock. 3 slow raps, and then the sound of rushing water. And